Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fatin binti Muhammad Fisol, and as for today, my partner and I, Ilya Diana, will be presenting regarding the topic of ethical gourmandism. My partner and I has divided the ethical of gourmandism into two parts, which is the first part will be explaining about the food ethics, food aesthetics, and more into the baseline of the ethical gourmandism, while the second part will be explaining about more into the depth of the ethical gourmandism itself. The first question to be asked is, what is it all about? First and foremost, let me introduce you to the three G's: gourmet, gluten, and gourmandism. Gourmet is a high quality and expensive food, while gluten is those who eats too much, and gourmandism who enjoys eating and eats large amount of food. However, the questions of what, why, and how in the ethical gourmandism, it is a complex matter to be understood by many. It is because there is no consensus on how and what we are to produce and consume. What food is, or whether people have similar experiences with it, it is not even clear. In 2012, Kaplan expresses that in our daily life, that includes cooking and eating, are both ordinary but are forms of ethical act. The author further asserts that ever since ancient times, cultural and religious belief have prescribed what we should eat and what we should not eat. The idea of ethical questions about food and eating is hard to classify. Therefore, we need to think more clearly and be responsible about what we eat, how we provide for ourselves, and have a clear vision why we act like so. Thus, Kaplan has clearly listed out few broad sets of concerns that is related with ethical gourmandism. The first one is responsibilities to self and others. The second one is food virtues. The third one is vegetarianism and animals. And the last one is agricultural and environmental ethics. For better understanding what is responsibility, it is also liability, obligations, and duty. A philosopher named Immanuel Kant, he stated that we do the right thing for the right reason because it is the right thing to do. However, the main reason we are doing the right thing is because that is our duty. As an example given by him, if you did not steal things because you were scared, not because it was your duty not to stealing, then you are not act in a good way morally. However, in the context of food, why must we be responsible to oneself and others? The main reason is because we simultaneously correlates with one another. The idea of having the responsibilities to oneself is much easier to understand. As we live from year to year since we were a baby, we have eventually learned to take care of ourselves. Things that we do for our own benefits are eat, sleep, take a bath, exercise, and etc. It is truly clear that we would benefit ourselves in many ways that we afford to. Thus, in the context of food, we eat to live our life. We would definitely avoid ourselves to starve without reason. Kaplan states that if a person only eats unhealthy diet, it means that he or she fails to respect themselves. As for the responsibility to others, we must provide foods that are edible, safe and hygienic, and avoid hunger and to feed the poor. This is an analogy for better understanding on why we are responsible to others. These roots represents food manufacturer, farmers, restaurateurs, food sellers and local grower. These branches of roots has all the will and power to grow a wonderful foods, because just like the food that we eat, every bit of it came from the roots itself. Thus, they have the responsibility to make sure that the food is edible, safe and healthy to eat. Just like any food sellers, they have the duty to provide foods that are hygienic, edible and safe. The second set of concern is virtue. Virtue is an attribute or characteristic that is considered to be inherently positive and is thus valued as a pillar of principle and a good moral being. The questions for anyone to ask themselves is, what kind of person should I be? The answer stated by Kaplan is integrity, courage, magnanimity, and wisdom. He also suggests that ethical life is not when we simply following strict laws, but it is about becoming a decent person. Everything that we have been taught of always have meanings and reasons. As to relate with this topic, ethics has been rooted in self-traits, relationship, and communities. Virtue has its antonym, which is vice. Virtue buy food with thoughtful thoughts, while vice buy food with impulsive thoughts. That is why virtue has a long-term self-control rather than vice. As an example, virtue buy healthy and safe foods, while vice buy unsafe and healthy foods. This is why vice would have the instant satisfaction rather than virtue. There are also three important subtopics regarding virtue, which are: first, hospitality; the second one is temperance; the third one is table manners. The third set of concern is vegetarianism and animals. Vegetarians are those people who do not consume any kind of meats. People becoming a vegetarian for few reasons. The first one is it is a healthy diet. The second one is their parents practice since they were kids. The third one is because they simply do not like meat. However, in 2018, Doggett explained that some become vegetarians on religious or moral ground to make them have a belief that it is wrong to eat meat. As an example, Hindus are vegetarians and consider the cow a sacred emblem of life that should be safeguarded and worshipped. Therefore, that is why Hindus do not consume any beef. Kaplan highlighted that humans have moral obligation to animals. There are few things humans should never do to animals, such as torture animals for fun or eat their neighbor's pet. The philosophy of animal rights is to allow animals to have the most fundamental rights desired by all living things. As example, the freedom to live a natural life, free from human cruelty, free from pain and suffering, and premature death. However, as you may observe from these photos, these animals being put into cogs in a machine instead of being living, breathing, and feeling animals. They live brief, unhappy lives and are often packed in cage boxes of pen that stop them from engaging in natural behavior. This dilemma has two major philosophical approaches, which are deontological, rights-based, and utilitarian, which is the consequent base. Deontological perspective affirm animal rights, therefore human responsibilities to uphold those rights. Animals also have dignity and interest in self-preservation like humans and thus enjoy the same constitutional right. Therefore, it is important to treat animals with value and respect. But as for the previous photos, it looks like these animals have not been treated right. This is happening because it is to provide for the billions of humans that eat meat. Agricultural and environmental ethics is the final and the fourth ethic that has been mentioned by Kaplan. The ethic is on how we respect the land that produces our food. And by that, the Union of Concerned Scientists believe the numbers of creative farmers and scientists are increasing and taking a different path, heading towards a more environmentally, economically, socially sustainable agricultural system. However, there is another approach to agricultural and environmental issues, which are to question the anthropocentric and the non-anthropocentric. The anthropocentric is a belief that considers that human beings are the most important entity in the world. And as for the non-anthropocentric, it is a belief that every human in this world live interdependently with other parts of nature. However, it takes vast amounts of land, food, resources, and water to raise animals for food. This is also why every broad of sets of concern is relates with one another, because more people, more food, worse water, and it is affecting each other in a worse way. In conclusion, every set of concern is just the baseline to understand what is ethical gourmandism is about. And next, Ilya Diana will be presenting more about ethical gourmandism.
Hi, my name is Ilya. I will continue presenting on the article of Ethical Gourmandism by Caroline Kosmeyer. In the article of Ethical Gourmandism, Caroline Kosmeyer raising up some issues on the subject of ethical criticism. Kosmeyer's study on the essence of flavor properties, those that are enjoyed for tender and savory morsels. Conditionally, an autonomy has to maintain the tastiness of a flavor, stand on its own as an attribute to be measured independently of other consideration on subject of aesthetic properties of taste. A person who truly supports what Kosmeyers call the article gourmandism will insist that the visual characteristic of such dishes strengthened or undermined by moral character that someone holds. Kaplan asserts that taste is the most important sense between 5 other senses involved in eating. Nonetheless, the taste is not just something that we can evaluate and feel in mouth, but in aesthetic, it acts as a leading metaphor. Kaplan states that the taste contributes to our bias toward art objects and our norm for artistic decision. However, Kosmeya stands on her argument that food is not an art, even though she agrees that the experience of taste and flavor of food can aesthetically assess. She then questioned about does the flavor of the food, whether or not they are good, delicious, tasty, piquant, and bland, relate to the food properties. Is the food can be eaten? Is it contain forbidden ingredient and how the food was produced? In this article, Kostmeyer also presents a few thoughts to justify her evaluation on the taste of food. First, taste is a sense whose natural affinities are culturally developed. Number 2, flavor properties manifest in experience are almost never simply pure sensation. Tastes are experienced as taste of something or other. Number 3, cultivating and refining taste always require knowing what one is eating. Number 4, taste possesses aesthetic characteristic. And the last one is if one finds a food delicious, then one aesthetically recognize it as good to eat. Back to the fundamental of taste, Kaplan expressed that the judgment on taste of food is not simply easy to justify. Although people can differentiate between a good food and a bad food, but the taste of the food is strongly subjective. It is whether people like it or not, acceptable or not, or do not like it at all. The flow of sense of taste itself firstly starts when people put the food in the mouth, chew and swallow the food, and the flavor will develop in the mouth. It is undenied that the taste of food is quite difficult to explain in detail. Next is cultivating taste. Cosmeyer convinced apparently that it is scarcely appropriate to contend that various kinds of food and drink can be cultivated, educated, mastered, and refined. Human taste bud has been trained since childhood to identify various of taste. It happened for the reason that human need and vital to eat. Moreover, food is one of the most basic needs of human. People eat to survive and keep energetic throughout the day. As food is important for human, it is also important for animal. Cosmeyer stated that human and animal both was driven by appetite. By no way does granting the appetite is a deep psychological force suggest that the fulfillment of our appetite is obtained simply by means of natural impulses. In short, we can see that the impulsive taste between human being and animal is way different. The basic nature of human animal in eating is the same, but the type of food that animal chooses to eat is limited. Animal eat the thing that they are like, and their preferences based on what type of animal it is. As for human, there are a few factors driven in influencing them in choosing food to eat, such as culture, diet, religion, festive, and spiritual. In addition, Our preferences for food are somewhat related to ethics. The liking we grow for food is often grounded in natural argument. Cosmerians give an example of what had happened decades ago, where coffee and hot chili peppers are not particularly liked because the taste of coffee is bitter and the chili peppers taste painfully hot. However, as time passed by, the acceptance of bitterness from the coffee was complacently good, and the spiciness of hot chili peppers is somewhat a pleasure. The hot burning taste is said to be a complement to the taste of food. Rosin and Volmecki, in their study of food preferences, have differentiated between preference and liking of food. As stated, preference is alternative choice, while liking refers to the response of flavor hedonically. Human preference of food are not determined by motivation or liking. It was said as a mental representation of our food choices that determine whether it is good or not to be eaten. To simplify, the preferences for food started from the liking process. Lastly, the preference in food choice is naturally driven. We are not guided by a natural taste for things we love either. Next is taste and its object. As a consumer, we definitely have no idea of what we are eating. Generally, we know the name of the food, but we do not know what composite to make the food. Cosmeyer claimed that nowadays in mass-marketed food production, flavor and texture enhancers was hidden on purpose on some most products sold at the supermarket. For example, the banana muffin that we eat can be produced by chemical means that nothing to do with the banana itself. What we can presume here is the taste experience of food are quite separable from the substance that caused them. Furthermore, Kostmeyer explains that the identity of food is not really the subject of awareness. However, once the expectation was violated, it will affect the taste of food. For example, when we eat something unexpected, the taste pleasure will be interrupted and it sends a signal noticing the mistaken presumption. Relate to a case that happened in Malaysia in December 2020, the issue of smuggling of frozen meat from China, Ukraine, Brazil and Argentina before they packaged the meat using the halal logo and selling it to the market throughout Malaysia. This issue has raised many criticism from consumer because it involved religious belief. This issue is an example of violated expectation of Muslim people. They feel doubt about buying frozen meat because of this issue. The anticipation of frozen meat was violated and the taste was so wrong once we know the truth. Then, Cosmeyer also argued that when people taste a food, whether they like, criticize, reject, or tolerate a flavor, they will virtually presume the identity of the food that is being tested. Clearly, a food tester can be wrong about the substance contained in food because it is not easy to detect the substance using human senses. Not only recognition but also taste evaluation is highly dependent on what the taste is for. For example, honey cannot have the identity of vinegar because the vinegar tastes unpleasantly sour, while honey has a sweet taste. Therefore, we cannot critique the flavor by itself because each substance has its unique flavor. Next is the discerning tongue and the cultivation of taste. The deliberate cultivation of taste and acquired ability to distinguish subtleties in taste provide further information of this point. A capability that involves the experience of what is under evaluation. Osmeyer states that humans develop preferences in what can become incredibly complex ways. The human population established a desire for food and flavoring that define the culture. This can be classified as cuisine with ample explanation over time. For example, Cantonese consider budu, a type of sauce, as the staple and comfort food. Most of Cantonese like it, and it is must have it for lunch along with ulam. However, the flavor and taste of budu is particularly savored that outsiders do not like it. Perhaps the loathing is a reaction of the character of the tester itself instead of the taste itself. Lastly, Cosmayer emphasized that one of the vital steps is to analyze what that is and how it is to taste. An argument about the cultivated taste that underlies the need to know what one's like. In terms of flavor of food and drink, it was derived not only from the substance itself, but also how it was prepared and produced. Production of food and drink plays a vital role in creating a different and unique flavor for each of them. The last point is about taste, aesthetic, and moral properties. Cosmayer stated that in using taste in context of appreciating beauty might sound off to be applied to food. Historically, we use eye and ears to acknowledge beauty, but rarely by using taste. Food in a culture plays an important role as it has many attributes which that consider them as outward, representational, expressive, and symbolic. All of these properties are including as aesthetic characteristic. She also stated that in the current usage of aesthetic, it can be singled out to both descriptive and verdictive properties of taste. Any aspect of taste or texture, including the haptic characteristic of heat, such as pepper tang, may be a property that one not only describe what one eats, but also describe it in a way that suggests savoring that is essential. Savoring is a key illustration of food and drink aesthetic experience. One who eats can savor the food qualities in a way that parallel to savoring the round, warm tone of violin. In establishing ground for ethical gourmandism, where the taste of food depends on its moral properties, it is the taster identity and its preparation that link the taste properties with moral valence. This observation goes parallel with a strain of ethical criticism which has been dubbed mean moralism. Mean moralism seems especially suitable for the assessment of food and their enjoyment because this cultivation often requires noticing flavor that are the result of the way the food was processed. Cosmayer tells that during his childhood, he drank milk from local farm, where the milk in spring was often sweet smell of the sprouting onion grasses that the cows graze on. An aspect of the means of the meat production have a direct causal effect on the flavor. Means traces remains in the product. Traces of means in flavor are by no means the only indication of eating moral aspect. Trace of the flavor that bind together with the aesthetic and moral element of taste and most strongly rooted case for this ethical gourmandism. As a conclusion, food ethics provide us with ethical analysis and guideline as a way of producing, distributing, preparing, and eating food. As mentioned earlier, since antiquity, our culture and region have stipulated what we should and should not eat. Therefore, with the presence of food ethic, people will be more understand and aware of what we can and cannot eat. Everything lies with the reason behind it. Then, what we can learn from ethical gourmandism is we can earn that the taste of food depends on its moral properties. The food itself cannot be considered ethical or unethical because It solely depends on the person of the tester. As stated before, the characteristic of food was supported or diminished by the moral character that someone carries. To wrap up this context, we may conclude that food knowledge is worth gaining by those who believe in what food can offer to us. Having deeper knowledge about food makes us value every single thing light behind the food, such as the metaphysics of food, epistemology of food, ethical of food, food technologies, and many more. Greater knowledge is essential as a base, especially for those in gastronomic field. I think that's all from us. Thank you for listening.